5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off. Welcome to the 85th Korea podcast. Just checking the sound, making sure that everything's okay. There is no unnecessary double feed. Welcome to the... All sounds good. Welcome to the 85th episode of the Korea podcast. I'm your host, Jack, located here in Ulsan, the beautiful city of Ulsan, South Korea. Welcome to the one and only podcast from South Korea that is run on YouTube live to answer your questions, to help you decide whether you want to move or live in South Korea, if that's your prerogative. The Korea podcast deals with anything and everything related to the living and working in South Korea on YouTube. How's the music? Answer your questions. Anything to do with living and working in South Korea, as well as running a business, a gambubang or a Hagwon business here in South Korea. If you are in business, if you're interested in starting and operating a language school here in South Korea, and are interested in finding out more about our Shane English Korea franchise and the possibility of opening up and starting and running a successful business in South Korea yourself here, then do give me a buzz and let's talk. Today is, what's today? The 12th of October. It's Halloween month, ladies and gentlemen. Goods and bads, I guess. And what else? I hope you had a good weekend. The weekend was kind of a rocky one for many here in the city of Ulsan. Ulsan apparently seems to have made the news. But before we... what to start with? Ulsan has made the news worldwide, and I wasn't even here to witness it, which, again, it's kind of like Schadenfreude kind of happening. But let's start with, Corona updates. Ulsan made the news, and then we'll go to our head topic of the episode, which is Korean history. And I'll open up with a disclaimer as well before we go to the Korean history thingy-majiggy, but that's in a while. Okay, so first things first, let me switch over here to the browser view. Korea, it's coronavirus again. It's just brief. Coronavirus as always, but Korea apparently is loosening up its restrictions. There's a bunch of funny memes going on the internet, on Facebook, about, Korea is now allowing congregations of 50 people or more outside, inside. Clubs are opening up and they're allowed to have masses of how many people there are, but only for up to 3 hours, and the clubs need to take an hour break after each and every three hours, which is so bizarre. I don't know where I saw it. I saw it somewhere on Facebook. Somebody posted it. Very weird thingy-majig. It's a very strange way to approach it. But apparently you can make protests now. 100 people, that'll be enough to stir up some troubles, I guess, stir up a noticeable presence. Sports fields are opening up. We'll once again be able to go to baseball games and soccer games, but with a limited capacity. They're allowing, I think, was it a 30% reduction or a 30% capacity? One of those. That's a huge difference. Again, something, that I caught sight of. I followed a lot of the instructions, I followed a lot of the advice of the people from the listeners from the last podcast. I did go and subscribe to the Arirang channel. Today I watched the news and it was, semi-instructive, semi-interesting. There was some stuff about the economy in Korea and in the corona progression. That's where I saw it. See, that's why I know it. It's good. Get on to the Ariran. So what's happening here? In Korea, coronavirus complacency feared as South Korea rolls back mitigation measures. South Korea rolled back most of its physical distancing restrictions Monday after 2 national holiday weekends passed without a surge in known infections so far. Korea conducted 5,000 how many tests? 10 coronavirus patients have died over. Okay, this is just a summary. In order to advance into the least restrictive tier of mitigation measures, the country's daily case count should remain below 50 for a sustained period of time, and the proportion of untraceable cases should be under 5%. Data shows contact tracing has failed. Actually, I'm not even going to read this. Basically, what's happening is, from on what I understand, what I've seen, Korea is rolling back its restrictions, so I guess social distancing is loosening up, and like I said, bars, clubs will be are allowed to operate, and places like soccer stadiums and baseball stadiums are once again allowed to open and admit customers, but with a minimized capacity. So things, I guess, are starting to look up, so to speak. Second bit of news. Ulsan, not so happy this time, but yeah. This happened on the weekend, on Friday, I believe, and basically caught the attention of the worldwide media. It was on CNN. I've got some friends here in Ulsan who arrived from Spain, and she received a phone call from her mother from Spain telling her about the accident that occurred here in Ulsan over the weekend. Me, myself, we were not here. My family and friends were actually gone. So, this is the Schadenfreude I was talking about. Schadenfreude. An incident, a worldwide incident that was recognized by many on the news, broadcasted worldwide, happened right underneath my nose here in my city, and I wasn't here to record it, I wasn't here to report it, and I wasn't here to broadcast it. It kind of stings, but clearly that's not something that should be going through my mind when you think about this, right? Because this is what happened. This building. So this is on CNN. Yeah, dozens hospitalized after fire engulfs 33-story apartment building in South Korea. Dozens were hospitalized in the South Korean city of Ulsan after a fire engulfed multiple floors of an apartment building late Thursday night. The fire apparently the fire broke out at the 33rd story building around 11 p.m. and continued burning through Friday morning. Authorities told CNN photos of the scene show black smoke billowing above the building and blackened debris scattered along the street. There have been no deaths reported so far. 91 people were sent to hospital for minor injuries such as smoke inhalation and abrasions. According to the Ulsan Fire Department, 77 people were rescued from the building and other 82 were evacuated to a nearby hotel, according to the country's Ministry of the Interior and Safety. It's a miracle that nobody has been injured, right? 91 people were sent to hospital for minor injuries. That's fantastic, man. That like, look at this. It's a huge bonfire. Ulsan is located so we know where Ulsan is located. I'm not going to read that. That's from CNN. Here is DW made for mine. South Korea massive fire engulfs high-rise block in Ulsan. This is from a different. You know what? I'm just gonna skip to what I wanted to show, and that is the people who were able to basically, who were here present. caught sight of it. Here's a video that's posted on YouTube. This is on-demand news. So what is it? So 1.5 minute video of the building on fire. The pieces flying outside is just the exterior of the building. From what I understand, I read somewhere that what happened in the building was that during the last typhoon, couple of typhoons that went through Ulsan, some of the exterior of the building was damaged, and I don't know what prompted the fire. I'm sure as days go on, we're going to find out more about what caused the fire. And that's one of the reasons why the building did catch on fire, because a lot of the insulation was gone or damaged due to the typhoons that took place here recently. Officials are investigating the cause of the fire, which they said was nearly put out by 9 a.m. So the fire basically burned over 12 hours, almost. It started at around 11 p.m., I believe, and continued on until, from what my students told me today, who live in the vicinity of where the fire took place, it was basically put out sometime in the early hours of Friday. So Friday around 11:30 in the morning, early noon, the flames of the building was still smoldering. Right. So yeah, luckily nobody got hurt. Right. What's this here? Blaze engulfs 33-story apartment block. Here's one more quick little video, I guess. The Guardian. Oh, it's an advertisement. Skip. Thank you. Yes, and so the conspiratorial spirit in me asks the question, begs to ask the question, if a 33-story building catches on fire and burns for 12 hours straight and still manages to stand up straight, how did the Twin Towers manage to collapse in such a neat and controlled fashion? That's not on the topic agenda. We're not going to talk about that, but that's something that I am, willing to discuss. No, I'm not. I don't really have enough information. But the stuff that I heard, it begs the question, how is that possible? This building, 12-hour burning, and pretty long, and the other ones just collapsed. Steel beams. Anyway, okay, we're moving on here. In the chat menu, nobody there. Fantastic. I love it. I love having a very minimal amount of audience and people coming and going. But if you are new to the podcast, if you are new to the channel, make sure to hit that like button. If you are watching now, make sure to remember to like the video. If you're new, also like. If you hate the video, make sure to subscribe and watch more of your hated videos. If you do enjoy it, then subscribe as well. And today we're moving to the as foretold, as promised. The topic of the day is the history of Korea, and I'm pulling this out. And so I want to make a disclaimer first to say that I am by no means an expert, far from it. I probably the opposite of an expert, actually, the anti-expert. I know nothing of South Korean history, and so this little piece that I found, I read through it. It was very interesting. It's kind of a short summary of the modern history, basically the modern history of Korea. It's not a history expand. What's the word? It's not a history of the entire. It's not the entire history of South Korea or Korea for that matter. If you are interested in having a little crash course on the history of South Korea, I posted a video below this video from, I have no idea what channel that is. Let me just check quickly. It's a good, what? Blah. I should have there's a 12 or 13 minute video posted below this video. So if you go expand the section and the more section, and if you scroll to the very bottom, you will find a link to a video that that basically gives you a very quick summary of the history of South Korea. I watched that right before this video. Very good. It's very abbreviated, obviously, but I think the most important points are mentioned in it, and it's very quickly run. Today, I would like to just to read this short article that I found, and it's about the modern history, and it's like starting, within the past, 1,000 years or something like that. Let me just pull out the quick video here from, which channel is that? History in a Nutshell. Okay, it's from the History in a Nutshell channel. That's where it's from. So if you're interested in seeing and getting like a very brief, abbreviated version of the Korean history, then this was a pretty cool video. You can follow that below. But today the goal is to just briefly talk about this, and this is the History channel, I believe, or maybe it's not, but this looks like the History channel. So anyway, I'm not an expert. I don't know how accurate this is. Again, this is modern history, so from my experience, from what I've seen, let me just minimize this a little bit so it's like readable. Okay, this is perfect. Yeah, this will go fantastic. And a lot of this stuff happened in kind of, this is common knowledge and things that happened during my time here as well. But I would like to talk about it and read through it and talk about it and see if we can make sense of, Korea as it is. Because there's a lot of expats here who are going through hard times, mainly because of the hard times of, adjusting to a new culture, adjusting to a new environment. There's a lot of misunderstandings and a lack of understanding of why people do the things they do, or why they behave or believe things that they do in South Korea. And I'm referring to, why Koreans believe or behave in certain ways that are not understood by Westerners or by expats in general, for one reason or another. So this little abbreviated history, modern history of South Korea, of Korea rather, maybe provide some insight. So I'm gonna read through it, and if you are listening now or later, jump in, leave a comment. If you disagree with me, please by all means let me know how stupid my comments are, or maybe if you have better insights on the actual article here itself as well. Chime in and let us know, yo. All right, so there are 11 points. History of Korea, colonial period, Korea divided, Korean War, Park Chung-hee military rule to democracy, Seoul Olympics, Kim Dae-jung, Park Geun-hye, South Korea today, and sources. So here we go. South Korea is an East Asian nation of some 51 million people located in the southern portion of the Korean peninsula, which borders the East Sea. We don't need that. We know. Okay. The United States and Soviet Union divided control over the peninsula after World War II, and in 1948, the U.S. supported Republic of Korea, or South Korea, was established in the capital city of Seoul. And the video I mentioned just earlier, the brief history, or the Korean history in a nutshell, talks about that too, and where and when this happened. Or when the capital of the city of Seoul, when the capital of South Korea was established, and some events took place. Anyway, okay, history of South Korea. Around AD 668, several competing kingdoms were unified into a single dominion on the Korean peninsula. Actually, I do recommend you go and watch that video, because it gives a very quick breakdown of what transpired prior to this date. How the kingdoms were unified, and it's very interesting actually. And again, in its very abbreviated version, it provides a pretty good glimpse of how messed up events, the messiness of events that took place that led to this unification. Very interesting. Successive regimes maintained Korean political and cultural independence for more than 1,000 years. The last of these ruling kingdoms would be the Joseon dynasty, 1392 to 1910, and that was on and off, I believe, as far as I remember. But basically, the dynasty lasted until 1910, right? Korea was regarded as the hermit kingdom, and it warded off several attacks by different nations, sinking like American ships, I think, or French ships, and dealing with some Japanese invasions prior to the modern Japanese invasion. After surviving invasions by Japan at the end of the 16th century and the Manchus of East Asia in the early 17th, Korea chose to limit its contact with the outside world. A 250-year-long period of peace followed, with few Koreans traveling outside their isolated country. So this basically says that before Korea was an open country for a long time, and it struggled. Koreans struggled with peace. Basically, there was constant turmoil. There were wars until Korea closed itself off, and a 250-year-long peace ensured. So it's no wonder that Koreans are still kind of like, see foreigners as causing trouble. This began to change in the late 19th century, when Western powers like Britain, France, and the United States made efforts to open trade and diplomatic relations with Korea with little success. Colonial period. At the outset of the 20th century, Japan, China, and Russia vied for control over the Korean peninsula. Japan emerged the victor, occupying the peninsula in 1905 at the conclusion of the Russo-Japanese War, and formally annexing it 5 years later. Over 35 years of colonial rule, Korea became an industrialized country, but its people suffered brutal repression at the hands of the Japanese, who tried to wipe out its distinctive language and cultural identity and make Koreans culturally Japanese. I think this is an important point. Including myself, I always wondered what's the animosity? Why do Koreans hold such animosity towards Japan? And like when you think of the World War, right? The world wars that ravaged the world. This is approximately a similar time span, or actually, during which 2 world wars took. That's Korea's occupation and Japan's occupation of the Korean peninsula, which was not a peaceful environment by any means. And basically, Japan was hell-bent on eliminating anything and everything that was Korean. Like, the goal was to erase Korea from existence, culturally and whatever. So, now in schools, I guess, books are written, or books that were written during those days, during those times and post-war, were very anti-Japanese, I could imagine. I haven't read any literature on that topic, but I can imagine that they were very pro Korean, very nationalistic, and very anti-Japanese. And I assume that a lot of the things that were written post-war are still taught to this day, and I'm sure that there are still taught to this day in schools, which inadvertently, renders the students, the young population of Korea, to have to listen to it and kind of develop their own views on Japan, right? Because a lot of their views are based on the literature that they're reading. So, and not all, obviously. There's a lot of young people who do enjoy Japan for one reason or another, but I've met and I've come in contact with a lot of people who hold a lot of animosity towards Japan, and I guess for good reason. So, during World War II, moving on, during World War II, many Korean men were compelled to serve in Japan's army or work in wartime factories, while thousands of Korean women were forced into providing sexual services for Japanese soldiers known as comfort women. We all know that. Yeah. Okay. Next, Korea divided. After Japan's defeat in 1945, the United States and the Soviet Union divided the peninsula into two zones of influence. By August 1948, the pro-US Republic of Korea, or South Korea, was established in Seoul, led by the strongly anti-communist Syngman. Is that the Jesus? Okay. In the north, the Soviets installed Kim Il-sung as the first premier of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK. I'm going to minimize myself because my mug is too big and it's bothering me. It's like distracting. Where am I here? Video capture. Ding. Oh, no. Cancel. Okay, what happened? That's better. There you go. We don't need to see me, do we? Do we? Korean War. So this is 1948, keep in mind, yeah? Korean War. South Korea's declaration of independence in 1950 led North Korea, backed by China and the Soviet Union, to invade its neighbor in an effort to regain control of the entire peninsula. US and United Nations troops fought alongside South Korean forces in the Korean War, which would cost some 2 million lives before it ended in 1953. The armistice agreement left the Korean peninsula divided much as before, with a demilitarized zone running along latitude 38 degrees north or the 38th parallel. Park Chung-hee, presidential rule. Here we go. Over the decades to come, South Korea maintained a continued close relationship with the United States, which included military, economic, and political support. And during that time, so between 1953 and 1961, Korea was kind of in a state of, well, as any nation would be, right? Rebuilding and just trying to pull itself together. And so there was a lot of shenanigans. A lot of shenanigans were happening, because after any nation... once a nation is devastated by war, it's kind of left up for grabs. And you can see that what was happening, for example, most recently in Iraq, with all the companies like Halliburton, Microsoft, and whatever else other companies were like lobbying or trying to get their claws onto the economy, and trying to rebuild the things that were destroyed during the war. That's what was happening, and that's what was happening in South Korea. It's not talked about in here, but if you dig deeper into books, you'll find out that there was a lot of investments coming in from the United States and other countries that were basically buying off, maybe a little bit later as well in the 80s, buying businesses off, for penny on the dollar, as the expression goes. Yeah. Over the decades to come, South Korea maintained economic political support through ostensibly a republic. Its citizens initially enjoyed limited political freedom, and in 1961, a military coup put General Park Chung-hee into power. In the 1960s and 70s, under Park's regime, South Korea enjoyed a period of rapid industrial development and economic growth, achieving a per capita income some 17 times that of North Korea. So the dictator that came in basically, made Korea industrialized. Yes. Military rule to democracy. Park was assassinated in 1979, and another general, Chun Do-hwan, took power, putting the country under strict military rule. An armed uprising by students and others to restore democratic rule led to many civilian deaths at the army's hands. Martial law was lifted in 1981, which is not that long ago. And these are pretty recent times, really. And Chun was indirectly elected president under a new constitution which established the Fifth Republic. By 1987, popular dissatisfaction with the government and mounting international pressure pushed Chun from office in advance of another revised constitution which allowed direct election of the president for the first time. Ro Tae-woo, a former army general who won the country's first free presidential election in 1987, further liberalized the political system and tackled corruption within the government. Apparently, he tackled it very unsuccessfully, but these shenanigans were taking place under the Confucianist system, which, again, when you watch the video that I posted, to which I posted the link, it also mentions about it. Corruption was rampant during the Shilla dynasty and Joseon dynasty. Was it Joseon, the last one? And the Confucianists, I vaguely remember something about during the Confucianist dominance that took place here in South Korea, which again came from China. Confucianist doctrines introduced a testing system. So the testing, it's almost like the testing that Korea loves so much now is a leftover from Confucianist times, and it's such an outdated form of education and separation that it's actually mind-blowing that it's still practiced to this day, that it's focused, that Koreans are focusing on this. Corruption was present for many, many years, and it still is, and I think it's so ingrained in the society that it's almost difficult to get rid of. Both because it's been here for so long, and also because of the structure of the society. Like Korea is such a closely knit society. It's a small country with a lot of people, and it seems like corruption is not going anywhere. Not anywhere soon. Yes. Seoul Olympics, okay. The reforms of the Sixth Republic came just in time for South Korea to host a successful Summer Olympics Games in Seoul in 1988, despite continued student protests and a boycott by North Korea. The 1980s also saw South Korea increasingly shift its economy toward high-tech and computer industries and improve its relations with the Soviet Union and China. Continuing the transition away from military rule and toward democracy, South Korea elected Kim Jong-un, its first civilian president in more than 30 years, in 1993. This is not a very long time ago. I was in high school. So basically until that time, Korea was like, there was turmoil non-stop. There was always either dictators. The last dictator basically ousted in 1979, and then I don't know what the story is with Chun, who was elected Popular dissatisfaction with the government and mounting international pressure pushed Chun from office in advance of Roh Tae-woo, a former army general who won the country's first free presidential election, 1987. So prior to 1987, Korea had a dictator who was basically ousted, and then Roh Tae-woo came into power, 1987, and in 1993, Korea had its first civilian president that was elected by the general public. 1993, when the heck was? Yeah, anyway, I was in high school sometime, I believe, or maybe a little bit younger. Yeah, no, first year of high school, I think. So this is only 27 years ago. Like it's so, you got to think like the parents, the people who are my age, all the ajishis, all the hard asses that so many Westerners have troubles with, that so many Westerners kind of harp on, are the people that lived through these times. They were teenagers when all of this stuff was happening. Like, if I was living in South Korea, that would be my past. That would be my future, so to speak. You gotta understand, like, these people went through all these times. So I'm talking about, like, people who are my age. I'm not even talking about people who are older than me, okay? 60, 70-year-old people who have gone through the war, for Pete's sake, or 80-year-old people who have gone through the war. 70-year-olds who have, they were just born, and if they lived through it, wow, they're lucky. Lucky and unlucky, I guess. Lucky to not maybe remember it, because they would have been like 3 by the time the war is over. But so I guess what a lot of expats fail to understand is that these people experienced a very different Korea than the one that we're experiencing, and I feel like a lot of expats kind of expect Koreans to behave or to understand Westerners from the Western perspective, and fail to try to understand the Koreans from the Korean perspective. And I think it's just a misunderstanding on the part of the expats of the foreign community, who simply don't take the time to study Korean history, man. And it's not very long when you look at it. Kim Dae-jung, Kim Young-sam's successor, Kim Dae-jung, who took office in 1998, would win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2000 for his contributions to democracy in South Korea, as well as his so-called sunshine policy of economic and humanitarian aid to North Korea. That same year, Kim Dae-jung and his northern counterpart, Kim Jong-il, held an historic summit in Pyongyang, the capital city of North Korea. Despite that brief period of relatively sunny relations, however, things soon deteriorated between the two countries, largely due to the North's continued development of nuclear weapons. The rise to power in 2011 of a volatile new North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, and his regime's repeated tests of nuclear missiles only exacerbated the problems. Park Geun-hye. Meanwhile, South Korea elected its first female leader, Park Geun-hye, the daughter of Park Chung-hee. So Park Chung-hee, we just read about, the dictator, Park Chung-hee, right here. Over the decades to come, South Korea maintained a continuing relationship with the United States, which included military, economic, political support. Through ostensibly a republic, and citizens enjoyed limited freedom. And in 1961, a military coup put General Park Chung-hee into power. So basically, the first female president's father came into power through a coup. So she had that hanging over her, but since he did such a fabulous job of bringing Korea out of poverty, people elected her, and then kind of shit hit the fan right after that. But in the late 1916, she was implicated in a scandal involving corruption, bribery, and influence peddling. and the National Assembly passed an impeachment motion against her that December. After impeachment was upheld in March 2017, the center-left candidate Moon Jae-in won a special presidential election in a landslide, pledging to solve the crisis with North Korea using diplomatic means. And so we are moving on to Korea today. South Korea is one of East Asia's most affluent countries, with an economic ranking just behind Japan and China, with most of the country covered by mountains. Majority of its population is clustered around the urban centers. I think we need some tunes. It's time for tunes. Here are the tunes. Are there tunes? Covered by mountains. Majority of it. I hope the tunes are playing. Alright. The capital of South Korea, Seoul, is home to more than 25 million people, or about 50% of the country's population. That's true. It's insane. Half the population lives in one city, the capital city of Korea, Seoul. In early 2018, South Korea welcomed athletes from around the world. I can't believe I didn't go to even smell the air in the city. What the heck, right? Insanity. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't. I was busy. I have no idea. It boggles my mind to this day, and it's something that's gonna plague me forever. Why didn't I go? No idea. The month before the games began, North and South Korea agreed to march under the same flag at the Olympics, the latest sign of a partial thaw in relations between the two countries. And that concludes this little introduction to modern history of South Korea. And just looking at checking some chats from the boys at the Korea Travel Advice Group. A lot of hiking going on. So I guess to conclude this whole thing on Korea, I think it's important to understand, especially for expats and anybody visiting South Korea, I think it's important to understand, for example, why Korea and Koreans have this animosity towards Japan, and it's easily done by looking at the history of how Japan, treated Korea and Koreans historically, and what transpired and when it transpired, more importantly, because what transpired didn't happen that long ago, but it did happen for a very long period of time. When we're looking at Western countries like the USA or Canada, these nations have never been occupied, and none of the people have experienced an occupation. Maybe not none, but the nations themselves have not. Sure, there are people who have traveled from Europe, from occupied regions to North America. And so there are people who have come from these backgrounds. But as a nation, Canada and South America and the USA have never gone through occupations. It's usually the occupied countries that experience, I think, have this sense of uniqueness maybe. But I could, having read this article myself, from my perspective, it's a lot easier to understand for me now why many Koreans, not all, but why many Koreans dislike Japan so much. And especially since, Korean government and the schools still use the texts that have been written by scholars and artists and whatnot not so long ago. And then inside the population itself, there are still people, just like you have survivors of the Holocaust, retell stories, and movie makers run to gather these stories, to write stories to depict the Holocaust. You've got like movies like Schindler's List, and there's a lot of other stories that keep retelling the stories of how Germany invaded, and how Germany did this and that, and how people died, and how people from all over the world suffered. It's the same story here in South Korea. I don't think it's fair to look at Koreans and say, I don't understand why they're so obsessed about hating Japan. It's very understandable. When you look at how people portray Germany, the former Germany, right, World War Germany, and how Germany was perceived then, it's very easy to look at how Koreans perceive Japan. I don't think there's anything amiss, and it's not, and it's very easy to understand how people of my age, Koreans of my age, who have gone through the turbulent times in their lives, may have what's the word? A certain type of attitude or dispositions towards expats or foreigners living and coming to Korea and living here, right? Like the word in Korean is it's our country, 우리나라, and everybody talks about Korea like it's their country because people worked hard, and there's a lot of stuff that happened during the IMF crisis, with people losing their money, losing their livelihood, and they gave up a lot for the nation. And so it's very easy to understand why such words exist in the Korean vocabulary. So I think for most expats, the one thing to take away from this podcast is to hopefully have a better understanding of why some Koreans may be a bit separatist, or not separatist, but a bit standoffish, and maybe not as welcoming as you would expect people to be in other countries. I don't know. Korea has a specific kind of history, a past that may be the reason for why people behave the way they are. And again, not all. A lot younger people are very different. Older generation people my age are very different, and they respond to foreigners very differently. A lot of the younger generations have not lived through these times. They've heard of them, they've read books about them, but it's secondhand or even third-hand information. While the people who have lived through these times, Christ, that's like my wife, 42 years old. They have a very different disposition on Korea and life here and their experiences, and just so I think as guests in this country, and I know this is kind of maybe sounding cliche, but I think as guests in this country, expats need to develop a better understanding of South Korea and as a nation and its people, as they are. And just understand that you're living in a different country. It's not your home, never will be, for very good reasons, because maybe people of Korea may unanimously agree that those who come as visitors have never been through all the crap that we've been through, have never experienced the things that we have experienced, and so technically do not have the right to call their country our own. And since Korea is a very well developed country, and it developed very rapidly over a very short period of time, I think a lot of people may feel like they are privileged, and may maybe even have the right to feel like they are privileged, and bask in it and rub it in other people's faces, I guess. Maybe rightly or wrongly. That's not the point. The point is that it is what it is, and what it was and what it isn't. So yeah, that concludes this rumble in the jungle. The Living Korea channel has been a bit dormant. For what reasons? I've been working on another project. Okay, so I've been working on another project for Hello Korea. The video is processed. I need to re-edit it because I cannot publish it in its original version the way it was submitted to Hello Korea. I can't publish it on my channel, but that will be coming up. I've got a bunch of videos that are lined up. It's just a matter of time of processing and editing and publishing. So fear not. This past weekend, the reason why I wasn't here to report on the fire that took place in downtown Ulsan, downtown Samsandong, is because myself and a group of friends and Mali and Liam and Lucy were in visiting the Soraksan National Park, Sorak Mountain National Park. Soraksan Mountain, that's so redundant, but I saw it on a sign. This year is the year to go hiking. Unlike every other time in history, probably the history of the Soraksan National Park, where crowds from all over the nation rush to view, to see, and to spend time, and for people to spend time waiting in lines to get to point A, from point A to point B. Right now, the park is empty. The best time for hiking is 2020 because there's nobody out. People are staying indoors. Traveling is restricted for now, at least. I don't know. The government is minimizing or dropping the restrictions, moving back restrictions. So who knows? Things might change. But for now, the weekend was very calm, very quiet. We spent some fabulous time hiking through the mountains, and there's a bunch of videos coming out of that. I think 3, not a bunch, but 3 videos. I'll see how to edit them, and there may be less, but that's what's coming up on the Living Korea channel, and on top of that there'll be other videos. So yeah, that's it for today. I need some water. I'm thirsty. These pretzels are making me thirsty. So if you're new here, if you enjoyed the podcast, if you enjoyed everything else about it, and I know you did, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and what else can I say? Come back for more stuff next week at the same time here on the Living Korea channel. Tune in to another episode, the 86th episode of the Korea podcast. And before that, make sure to check out some of the videos that I'll be posting over the next upcoming week. I hope to post 2. Hopefully, since I'm free now, I'm not editing anything else but stuff for the Living Korea channel. I'll keep you updated. The very small number of people who are following and are thank you for your encouragement, and thank you for the support. If you would like to support the Living Korea channel, then follow us. There's a link to the Patreon. You can go, and I created 1 tier. It's a very small tier, just the support tier. I will continue working on that. There's more to come, hopefully. I'm provided. I'm a busy man. What can I do? Alright everyone, thank you for tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and have a good night, have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the second week of October. Good night.